Canada deploys special forces to Ukraine amid rising tensions with Russia. National, Globalnews.ca.
Here's a summary of the article.
Canadian Special Forces operators have been deployed to Ukraine amid rising tensions between the NATO military alliance and Russia, Global News has learned. The deployment of a small contingent from the Canadian Special Operations Regiment comes as diplomatic talks aimed at staving off an armed conflict in Ukraine have faltered, and an estimated 100,000 Russian troops remain camped on Ukraine's border. Neither the government nor the Canadian forces would officially confirm the Special Forces' presence in Ukraine when contacted by Global News, other than to say Special Forces operators have been involved in Canada's broader assistance to Ukraine. The Canadian Special Operations Forces Command is part of the broader armed forces efforts to support Ukraine's security forces, wrote Major Amber Binu, a spokesperson for Special Operations Command, in a statement to Global News. Binu noted that Canadian Special Forces have been providing training, as well as instructor and leadership expertise, to Ukrainian counterparts since 2020, although sources told Global News the latest Special Forces contingent, which left for Ukraine around January 9, is not conducting training. According to the Canadian government, Ottawa has committed roughly $700 million in assistance to Ukraine since January 2014, including provision of non-lethal military equipment and sending rotations of 200 Canadian Armed Forces troops every 6 months to train Ukrainian security forces. Braun said Canada and its allies need to continue to support Ukraine, not only from a military perspective, but also economically and diplomatically, as Russia's goal is to isolate Kyiv and present Ukraine as a failed democratic experiment.
This post received a score of 8,300, with an upvote ratio of 97%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Okay, can we calm this all down? The real scoop is there's a kid out there that plays hockey like a cross between Crosby and Ovechkin. He'll be playing for Team Canada, not Team Russia as far as we can help it.
They are there to help evacuate Canadian citizens away from the potential conflict zone. So the risk is very little they'd actually encounter a Russian tank battalion, yet alone engage it.
Read the article, guys. Sources told Global News that the Canadian Special Operations presence is part of an attempt by NATO allies to deter Russian aggression in Ukraine, and to identify ways to assist the Ukrainian government. The unit has also been tasked with helping to develop evacuation plans.
Remember that a big portion of Canadian population are third-generation Ukrainians.
Even more are fourth, fifth and sixth, especially in the prairies. Very few sixth. The prairies were pretty empty until 70 years ago. Many Ukrainians moved after the Holodomor massacre, and WWII.
70 years ago is 1952. The prairies were not empty in the 1950s. Shit, even in 1910 it was well settled. Prairies have been well settled for over 100 years. The railroad was built nearly 150 years ago, so I really do not know what you mean by the prairies being pretty empty until 70 years ago. Edit. I will also throw in that Saskatchewan and Alberta were created as provinces in 1905. Provinces being government that require population to govern and sustain.
This is just what is being told to the public. I'm sure there's plenty of NATO operators scattered around Ukraine doing a lot of things.
I think it's a fairly safe assumption that NATO has already tabulated exactly what and how many assets can be in the combat theater within 72 hours should things really pop off. All it'll really take is the first photo of a Ukrainian school-age girl with her leg blown off to hit most major newspapers, and a lot of contingency plans are going to be reviewed.
Canada is unusually tight with Ukraine. Lots of Ukrainians in Canada. So not surprised to see this. What's not so clear is how much influence a small number of Canadian SF, well trained as they are, can have against a 100,000 strong invading army.
That's not what they're there for. There are a lot of Canadian citizens in Ukraine, and despite all travel advisories and cautions to get people to come home, they're very aware they will need to have a military presence around the embassy, where all the Canadians ignoring warnings will go for their free ride home.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.